Hello and welcome to Behind the Grind. I'm Matt Dolly, and today on this show, our guest, he needs no introduction. He's been a fantasy betting analyst on Sirius XM Fantasy Radio. He is the heartbeat of the Big Apple. Before there was Dez Bryant winning flag football MVPs, there was Adam Ronis doing it. Adam, how you doing today?
Doing great, man. Appreciate the invitation. Glad to be here tonight.
This is a long time coming. I mean, I've been trying to get this going here for a couple of years. We're in season 4. You should have been on season 1. That's how long ago it's been going. So glad to finally get you. Better late than never. And we've had a lot of demand for you to come on the show. A lot of people say, hey, you got to get Adam on there. He's one of the best in the business, not only at what he does, but as a person too. So we've had some of your good old colleagues there from XM Radio on the show. And the Fantasy Alarm crew from Lisa Ann to Matt Deutsch to Howard Bender. I mean, the who's who of the fantasy world and Adam Ronis all in the same circle, the circle of trust when it comes to fantasy analysis. Now, Adam, we like to start every show off with a nice, easy question here to kind of break the ice a little bit. If you were coming in, you've got some good closer music there out in the Big Apple. I mean, it hasn't really worked out very well recently, but you got the big old trumpet going on there. So if you're coming out to close out a ball game in the bottom of the 9th inning, what is that music to introduce you to the people going to be?
Definitely something by Papoose. And I don't know if a lot of people know who he is, but I'm big into hip hop. And Papoose is like kind of an underground artist, but he became a little bit more mainstream over the last few years because he did a lot of mixtapes. He was on the mixtape circuit. So one of his most famous songs is called Alphabetical Slaughter, where he spits out the letter of the alphabet A, and every word that he says is A, then B, and he goes through the whole alphabet. So definitely something from him because I'm into the old school hip hop where it's more lyrics and storytelling. People could say, oh, you're old. And I'm sure we've said that about our parents and people before us, but I feel like we've kind of lost that in hip hop today. So something from Papoose, but Alphabetical Slaughter comes to mind.
You know, it's funny because I don't pronounce names right very often, especially in the NFL. I mean, some of the names, they're hard. I mean, if it goes past 2 syllables, I struggle. So I literally went to pronunciation, Papoose, and I tried to make sure I was going to nail that throughout the show. I knew I was going to mess it up in one way or the other, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to throw it out there. So what you said, that alphabetic slaughter, can you give us a little bit? We encourage singing here on the show, Adam. Give us something.
All right, it starts off A, alert, assassins at large, allegedly, automatic artillery, angrily aimed and aggressively. And he just goes through the whole thing, A, B, C, the whole alphabet. And then on one of his second albums, he goes backwards, starts with Z. So yeah, he's so talented, and you could tell in his music too. And, over the last few years too, he's become more inspirational as well in his music. So he technically kind of retired, but I did see him something from recently say he's going to come out and put out some new music.
So I'm not really a rap guy per se. I'm here in the Rocky Mountains, kind of in the country where the plains meet the mountains. I got that whole redneck feel, but hey, I do like myself a little bit of the old school rap. So I'm feeling that the new stuff doesn't really quite do it for me, but the old school stuff, I love, especially when they kind of kick it back there a little bit. DMX comes to mind there.
I was on a plane with DMX. So I was on the plane and I heard his voice, and it's very distinctive. And I was with my friend and I said, that's DMX. He's like, nah, come on. I'm like, that's DMX. He's like, nah, it's not. It's not. So we leave the plane. We make a left, sitting at the bar, DMX. He's like, yeah, let me get a double shot of Henny. So small world that we were headed to Miami, and that happened to be, I think it was the Source Awards that weekend. So yeah, I was on a plane with DMX. Didn't know it though until the plane landed and we left.
That sounds like a missed opportunity in itself there. But is there a song out there? Let's forget about Papoose here and all that other stuff. I have children, so I hear all kinds of things. I've gone through the Hannah Montana. I've gone through the Miley Cyrus stage, the Selena Gomez. And I have to admit, there's some songs here that I kind of get the little jingle to every once in a while. There's a few guilty pleasure songs that I've heard along the way. Is there a guilty pleasure song, Adam, for you that people are like, you listen to what?
I can't think of any off the top of my head now because I really do listen to so much hip hop. I really kind of don't. In fact, when we were doing a Sirius XM morning show, when I did it with Scott Engel for the Roto Experts in the Morning, they would make fun of me because they would play a lot of rock and I wouldn't even know like some of the most popular stuff. And they would just sit there. All right, Ronis, who's this? And I would not get some obvious stuff. So over the years, I kind of learned about it through that show. So I'm really I have tunnel vision, unfortunately, with some things. Music is one of them, and the types of women I like as well. So yeah, I just kind of have that tunnel vision sometimes. So it's mostly hip hop and reggae for me, man.
I love that you mentioned Scott Angle because I got to catch karaoke there in Canton a couple years ago, and he busted out the Aerosmith "Walk This Way," which again has those hip hop roots to it as well. So maybe we get a little Adam and Scott karaoke in Canton here in 2023 because I know it's something that we do every once in a while, and I mean it kind of goes over pretty well.
Yeah, he is big into the karaoke. He does some Run DMC as well. That is his thing. He lives for that.
And it's fantastic. I mean, and he gets right into it. Like it is living. He's doing the dancing. He's doing everything. He's nailing it to a T. Now, let's kind of move on here just a little bit and talk about how did you get into sports?
Yeah, I don't know how specifically in terms of, so I grew up with around three women. It was my mom and two sisters. My dad passed away when I was 4 years old. He was big into sports. He had season tickets for the New York Rangers. He was a Yankees fan, so I probably wouldn't have gotten along with him because I'm a Mets fan. So that's the thing. I always kind of look back and I'm like, okay, because most people will say their father, stepfather, someone, they had a male figure that got them into sports. It could be a female too, but most of the time you hear people, it's their dad. I didn't have that. And my mom liked sports, but she wasn't really into it. So I don't know how I became a sports fanatic because if you ask anyone who knew me when I was 5, 6, 7, 8, the first thing they'll say is, oh, he loves sports, Mets, Cowboys, Rangers, whatever it is. So I was just big into sports since a kid, collecting baseball cards. I grew up a mile from Shea Stadium. Went to my first game in 1987. I could walk to the stadium, and I was always big into sports. And then as I got into high school and I realized, damn, this body's not going to take me to the professional level, I was like, I have to do something in sports. I grew up in New York listening to WFAN all day and all night. And I said, that's what I want to do. I want to talk about sports for a living. That's my passion. So in high school, I started writing for the newspaper. Then once I graduated high school, I started interning at weekly papers, writing for weekly papers, and I went to Queens College. I'm the most famous graduate from Queens College. Jerry Seinfeld is second. So for those that don't know, in New York. And they didn't have a radio station there. So I just started taking journalism classes, writing for the newspaper, covering the college teams. They had said that a radio station was going to start just within the college, and I was excited for that, but it never happened. And then I was going to transfer to Hofstra for their broadcasting abilities, and I put down the deposit, but I never went. So I stayed at Queens College for 4 years and did mostly writing. So after I graduated from Queens College, I started working at Newsday, a newspaper in New York where they had editions in Long Island and New York. So I went back and forth. I started Long Island, went to New York edition, went back to Long Island. So I got to cover a lot of athletes, mostly covering high school sports and some college. And occasionally I would go to a Mets Yankees game in the locker room, maybe a Jets or Giants practice, Rangers, Knicks practice. So got a little bit of exposure to everything. And then in 2003, I went to the Connecticut School of Broadcasting because that's really what I wanted to do is more radio. So they train you radio, TV, and Kevin Burkhardt, who everyone knows, broadcasting for Fox, was one of my instructors. So, he helped me out along the way, listening to demos and everything. And so I was writing for Newsday, and I was also Blog Talk Radio. They had a fantasy sports channel. I forgot what year it started, 2008, 2009, 2010. So they reached out to me. I think it was Lenny Melnick and Paul Greco reached out to me and said, hey, we've heard you as a guest on shows. Do you want your own show? I'm like, sure. So I did an hour show by myself on a Wednesday and a half hour on Tuesday night. And then for Newsday, I started writing a fantasy football column and a fantasy baseball column. And Scott Angle saw this, heard me on Blog Talk Radio, and he said, hey, I think you're really good. I think you should come write for Roto Experts. I'm like, all right, cool. So I started writing for them. And then when Sirius XM Fantasy Sports launched the channel in 2010, Roto Experts had the morning show. And Scott Angle was supposed to do it with someone else. And that guy bailed 2 or 3 weeks before the show was supposed to launch. So they were like, what are we going to do? Scott's like, I got the guy. He's like, all right, bring him in. So it was me. We did a demo, and at the beginning, I don't think I was good because I was too focused on what I was saying instead of letting my personality shine out. And I think that happens to a lot of people early on too. And one piece of advice I'll give to people too is if you're doing, and so many people do podcasts now, go back and listen to your first few because you suck and you're lifeless. And I learned that I was doing a color commentary for a high school baseball game. And I went back and listened and I was like, wow, this is awful because it was a windy day. It was cold. It was March in New York, but it sounded like I didn't want to be there. And I said, that's never going to happen again. You got to show like you want to be there. People are listening. And I hear a lot of podcasts now. The information could be great, but people sound bored and you can't be like that. So that was something I learned early, but I always wanted to do it. And then so in 2010, I was doing the morning show with Scott Engel. We did it from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. So for 4 hours. And I was like a national radio show just thrown into the fire. And for the first 2 years, I got paid nothing, not 1 cent. All they paid for me was my transportation. So I would wake up about 4 a.m., take a bus and 2 subways from Queens to New York City, do the show, go back home, maybe rest for a little bit, and then drive from Queens to Long Island in rush hour traffic, which was about an hour, and either go to high schools across Long Island to cover games or go into the office, take scores from the coaches that we put in the paper the next day. So I wouldn't get home till 11:30, and I would barely sleep because I would come home and now, all right, what happened in baseball today? Or if it's football season, waiver wire stuff, all the news, catch up on all the news. So I would sleep maybe 2 hours a night. And everyone would say, you'll get used to it. But I've always been a night owl and I never did. So I find it funny because every year on social media, there's always that, should you work for free? And I came up in the era where I did it. And at the same time, I know everyone's situation is different. I wasn't married then. I didn't have any kids. It was just me. So I had the ability to do it. I understand some don't. You might have a kid or two. You might be married and money is, you need the money and you can't do it. I was fortunate that I was able to do it, but I definitely paid my dues. And it opened the door for me to do a show with Lisa Ann. And that's when Sirius XM hired me as a part-time employee. So it's just paying your dues. Once you get that opportunity where the door opens, you got to take it and run. And it's really difficult right now in this industry. I will say that it's saturated. I'm having my own situation myself because currently at this time, I'm not full-time. I'm not employed full-time. And that's the first time it's happened to me in a long time. And there's some good people in this industry right now that are out of work. But anytime you have a dream or aspirations to do something, you just got to work hard and pursue it. And yeah, I've always wanted to do this. So I'm blessed. I even all these years, whenever I talk to people, I say, I'm fortunate. There's not a lot of people who have been able to make a full-time living in this industry. A lot of people do this on the side for fun, and they really don't make a lot of money off it. I'm hoping that continues for me, but for a long time it has. And, you get that reputation, and a lot of it is work ethic too. I think sometimes people feel, oh, it's fantasy and betting. Oh, it's simple. And I'm not saying it's brain surgery, right? But you really have to put in the work. You have to follow everything that's going on. You can't go on a show and act like, oh, I didn't see that news. No, you have to be on top of everything. And, there's more competition. A lot more people are doing this. So it takes a lot. And I do 3 sports. I do football, basketball, and baseball, season long, and betting too. So it's even more work when you incorporate the betting into it. So again, not complaining. I love it. I hope I can do this for the rest of my life as a career. But I think sometimes people from the outside who just want to jump in don't realize the work that's involved. And I even hear it from people when I'm handing in my assignments on time. They're like, oh, a lot of people don't. I'm like, really? Now, again, maybe it's different for me. I came from the journalism business. I worked for a daily newspaper where there were no, oh, I missed. No, you don't get it in that night. It doesn't make the paper. You're not going to keep your job. So, in fact, one time I was covering a high school basketball game. My laptop, this was on deadline. I had maybe 20 minutes to get the story in because it was a night game. So you get early deadlines. So you really only have time to go interview the coach or player, get a quick quote. You already have half your story written, plug in the quote, whatever. Half the laptop screen was black. I couldn't see. And my friend was from another paper was there. He's like, I have no idea how you wrote that story and didn't panic. I said, job's got to get done. Hopefully, the words weren't, everything was spelled correctly, and hopefully the editors picked it up. But the bottom line is I had a deadline to get in it and get the story in. So, yeah, sorry, I went on and rambled a little bit there.
No, I think that's what this show is for, man. Getting that inside look on everything. I love how you mentioned the personality, because I've gone back and I've watched a lot of my older stuff, and it was horrible. And I even let the personality out. Like I find when you write, it's very hard because you got so many words, because there's always that tight. Okay, you got 500 words, so you want to get as much information as you can. But at the same time, you need to let your personality somehow come through in your writing, which is very difficult to kind of manage. Because I know for me personally, Bob Harris got me into the Pro Forecast. He goes, yeah, I just need you to write 200 words on this. I'm like, 200 words? Not a problem. 800 words later, I'm like, now I'm cutting down to 200 words. I'm like, what do I cut out? I mean, this is my article. How do I? So, I mean, I get it. Like, you get into this video and your personality, you almost have to feel like you have to choose between one or the other, information or personality. It's very hard to kind of blend both of them. And those that do have a lot of success. Now, one thing I've noticed about the teams that you've cheered for typically have a lot of success. Now, I got to figure this out, because a lot of people from New York will not cheer for the Dallas Cowboys. The people that cheer for a New York team and a Dallas Cowboys team usually cheer for the Los Angeles Lakers. There's that group of people. But you've got the Mets, you got the Cowboys. You got to kind of explain this to me. How did the Cowboys become Adam Ronis' team?
Yeah, so like I had mentioned before, so I grew up basically without a father because he passed away when I was 4, and I had a neighbor who was like a big brother to me. So right when I was getting into football, he introduced me, and he was a Dallas Cowboys fan. So I became a Cowboys fan because of him. And I don't know if I should thank him or yell at him. Because, well, look, I guess I can't complain, right? I saw 3 Super Bowls in the 90s. I have a lot of Jets fans around me who have never even seen a Super Bowl, or they were little kids when they won that Super Bowl early in 1969. But, yeah, it's been brutal, though, to be a Cowboys fan over the last 20 plus years, because the expectations are pretty high every year. And a lot of times they do well, but we all know once the playoffs come, and I said it last year, and I was getting Cowboy fans angry at me. I said, look, I don't believe in this team until they get it done in the playoffs. We've seen it every single year. They have great success, and then in the big spot, they don't get it done. And once again, it happened. I mean, 2 years ago against San Francisco, I thought they played very well, and I'm not as critical of Dak Prescott as other fans, but he lost that game for them. They held the San Francisco offense to 17 points, and San Francisco didn't score a touchdown until the fourth quarter. That's a game you got to win. This past year, I can't believe that they got absolutely embarrassed at home by Green Bay. I mean, they were never in that game. So they just don't have that ability to take it up a notch. And Dak Prescott's the type of quarterback who needs a lot of talent around him. There's certain quarterbacks that can elevate others. Patrick Mahomes, obviously, top of the list. We looked at his receiving core last year. How's he going to get it done? And they won again. But that's Mahomes. He can do that. Dak can't. You got to put a lot around a talent around Dak, and they haven't done enough to take it to that next level. So, but yeah, that's how I became a Cowboys fan. Everyone asked me that, and I'm fortunate. I go to, usually, obviously, Cowboys come in to Jersey every year. So I think I've gone to, 3 games now. I went to the one last year where the Cowboys week 1 Sunday night won 40-0. It was pouring rain, so I did leave after the third quarter. I went with a Giants fan, and he had to work the next day. I'm like, all right, we can go. We've seen enough. They kicked their ass. So, but yeah, that's how I became a Cowboys fan. And Rangers fan, I guess, probably because my father left a lot of memorabilia behind, and he was a season ticket holder. And the Mets, I guess, because I grew up about a mile away from the stadium. And I don't really have a basketball team. I kind of identify more with players, and Kobe Bryant was one of my favorite players because, I'm all about work ethic. Anyone who works hard, I respect. And I just feel that whole grind, that mentality is what I have. And, Kobe Bryant just put in the work. Yeah, he was talented, but one of the stories that sticks out for me with Kobe Bryant is they did a special on the Olympic team that they put together, that all-star Olympic team, after they were losing year after year. And they were out in Vegas, and they all went out to the club, and they came back to the hotel around 5:30 a.m. And Kobe's didn't go with them. He's waking up, coming out, going to work out in the gym. And all the teammates saw that. They're like, wow, this guy's not playing around. Next 2 weeks, they all went to work out with him at 5:30 a.m. So, that's the type of work ethic that you need to succeed in life. And his ability to want to take that clutch shot, want his will to win, because uh, obviously I'm not on that level, but I'm the same competitive nature. Like, I don't care if it's an industry league that's for free. I don't want to lose my name's on it. And, I attack everything the same. And a lot of people don't do that. They do these drafts because they get publicity early on. It's in a magazine, it's on the radio. And then they use it as an excuse. Oh, well, yeah, it didn't mean anything. I'm in 15 leagues. Okay, well, then don't play in 15. Play in 7 if you can only handle 7. But you should play every league to the end, whether it's for money or not.
You know what? I agree with that. The one thing about you talk about that redeem team there, I think they were playing Spain and Gasol was on the other side. He went to set that screen and Bean's like, no, I'm going to run right through him. And he ran right through him. The rest of the team's like, oh, damn, if he's going to do that to his teammates. I mean, he's here to play, man.
So that's how you got to do, though, man. The will to win. It doesn't matter who's on the other side. And, Kobe was the epitome of that. And it really, like, his death, like, hit me hard. Like, you wouldn't think so. Like, I never met the guy or anything, but I remember exactly where I was. I was in I remember it was a Sunday. I think I might have been the weeks between the AFC, NFC Championship, Super Bowl, if I remember. I don't know if there was football that day, but I remember I was at a, coffee shop by myself. And I scroll on Facebook and I see Kobe Bryant passed away. I'm like, this cannot be real. And then I go to double check and saw it. And I was like, wow, man, this is just stunning, especially since, he had just retired and was spending time with his daughters and everything. It's just, it was mind boggling, to pass away that young. And, I was the same age as him. He was born in August of 78. I was born in April. So it was eye opening. I was just like, wow, man, it sucks.
It really does open your eyes about how fragile life can be, like at any time, right? So we can't really take anything for granted. I think there's that old saying, like, there's 3 times in a man's life where it's reasonable to shed a tear. 1, if he gets kicked in the groin, you can shed a tear. The birth of a child, you can shed a tear. And when one of your favorite sports legends passes, you may shed a tear. Now, we talk about New York, Yankees, Mets, Giants, Jets. We got the Knicks, Nets, Rangers, Islanders. They have now combined for 100 combined seasons of futility. Now, I'm a Montreal Canadiens fan. We haven't won since 93. I'm a Raiders fan. That's even longer, right? I'm a Montreal Expos fan. That's never going to happen ever again. Well, hopefully it does. I mean, there's a chance. But New York, I mean, I'm not even going to add the Dallas Cowboys to that 100 years of futility. You want to talk about this? Like, is this something, or should we say this for another show altogether?
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. I mean, look, the Rangers have been in the Eastern Conference Finals 2 of the last 3 years. Obviously, they just got eliminated. That was disappointing. They completely got outplayed, though, by Florida. It's like that series probably shouldn't even gone 6. Their goalie, Shesterkin, was amazing to keep them in it. They completely got outplayed. Unfortunately, I thought you were going to ask who's the next one to win. And I hate to say this, and I hope I'm completely wrong, but it's looking like the Yankees right now. Everything is going right for this team at the moment, and it really sucks. I am a big Yankee hater, cannot stand them, but everything is clicking for them right now, and they're going to get Garrett Cole back soon, their ace, who hasn't even pitched this year. But at the same time, they have not had any injuries yet. And Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, those are guys that get hurt all the time. So I'm not saying they will, but they clearly look like the team now. I mean, look, we know with the Jets what happens every year. The expectations are high. People are picking them to win the division. The optimism is flowing. The season starts and it falls apart. And look, it all depends on Aaron Rodgers. Can he stay healthy and be productive? If he can, they'll be dangerous. But we've been through this road before. The Giants certainly don't look like a contender this year. And, I mean, Rangers, hopefully they can get back there next year. It's real difficult to do, but we just saw Florida get in the Stanley Cup Finals last year. Now they're back. So maybe Rangers make a couple of changes. Maybe they're the team that can do it. It certainly isn't the Mets. I can tell you that.
That's for another stay altogether there. We're talking about the New York Mets. Now, let's rewind this back a little bit. You mentioned Newsday there back in the day, covering for high school sports. What kind of game does someone have to bowl in high school to get mentioned in the newspaper? Like 200, is that good enough? Can someone get some love for a 200 game?
Does this have to go back to Justin Fensterman? Because
it very well might. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Because he was a bowler in high school, and I made fun of him, and we did a show together on Sirius XM Fantasy for many years, and he blames me for never getting in the paper when he rolled. I don't know, but remember in Long Island, so everyone is listening from a different state. So high school sports coverage, I remember I worked at a paper in Florida, Boca Raton News. I think we only covered 8 high schools. Much easier to get things in the paper. Long Island has hundreds of high schools. So we're taking hundreds of calls with limited space to cover all these sports. You have to bowl like really well to get in. Like I'm talking like 250 or higher. So yeah, you can't get in all these players because there's limited space. And remember too, it's New York. So you got a lot of coverage devoted to pro sports. On a given night, you might get 1 or 2 pages for high school. On a big night, maybe 4. But those big sports, no disrespect to bowlers, but it's just not considered a major sport.
All right, fair enough, fair enough. I just have to throw that out there for fancy that we were talking about. There's a came up. I thought I'd bring it up there. Now, that's one. Maybe that was a decision that probably worked out better for you not to kind of include into your whole life story there. But let's talk about maybe a decision that helped change the trajectory of your life.
Oh, man, that's a good one. Let's see. Just life in general or
in life
career?
In general, maybe your professional life, maybe your personal life, but maybe that one decision you're like, you know what, without that decision, I'm not necessarily right here today.
Okay, not getting married. I think that was critical. I don't know. I have different views on marriage than others. I feel like you should get married later in life. I see a lot of people get married at a young age and it fails. I think you don't know yourself in your 20s. I think it takes a while. And even when you hit 30, compared 30 to 40, I think you're different and you change. So I guess I was so devoted to my career, what I do. And the thing is, whenever I date someone, I always let them know from the beginning. I said, look, this is what I do. Because remember, I was doing radio. I was probably averaging for a good time between 6 and 8 shows a week. And doing writing and then again playing in all these fantasy leagues. So obviously I love women, but my career was such a big part of what I do. And whenever I met someone, I let them know. And in fact, one relationship ended because of it. And I think we met in like April or May. So there was no football. And I let her know, hey, when the season starts, football, September, like I'm not available Sundays. Like I work all day. So just letting you know, Sundays came and she's like, oh, I'm not used to being with someone that I can't see on Sunday. And she was a nurse. So she's on call. There were times that I was with her and she's like, oh, I got to go work. I didn't say anything because I understand the importance of your career and work. So it would be hypocritical of me to say, hey, I'm doing this. And then you got to leave for work. So I understood. And she's like, well, I'm not used to being with someone on Sunday and this and that. And I'm like, well, that's not going to change. And I'm like, okay, if I was a lawyer or a doctor and I had to work on Sunday, it's different. But because my job is watching football, like that doesn't seem like a job. And then even another woman I dated, she's like, I don't think what you do is real. And she came out with me to Vegas for the FFWC because I used to work for them. So every year I would go out there, draft a couple teams and watch football that first Sunday and then fly back home out in Vegas. And she came with me and she's like, wow, this is real. Like all these people coming up to you and they know you. She's like, I didn't even think this was a whole big thing like this. So I think that was maybe years ago. People didn't understand the magnitude of fantasy sports, specifically fantasy football, where obviously it's become way more popular now. But I think not getting married probably did help me in my career. And I'm not saying I'm adverse to marriage, but I also think it helped me live my life, kind of do what I want. And not saying I'm not going to get married. It'll probably happen soon.
Each of their own, different strokes for different folks there.
Or maybe not having kids too, that I know of. There might be some kids out there, but I don't know. As far as I know, I don't have any kids.
Well, you kind of alluded to this next question here a little bit earlier there on about maybe the competition for jobs and stuff in the industry. Let's talk about your journey. And it even started before 2010, from before XM radio. We talked about some of these newspaper publications. What are some of the biggest changes that you've seen now versus when you first started in this journey?
obviously way more coverage now. There just wasn't as much then. Even I had to kind of fight to get a column in the newspaper, and that was probably like 2007. So, and then obviously Sirius XM with a 24-hour channel, that was a big deal. And there's more outlets now, there's more coverage. So I think it's more saturated too. There's just so many ways to get information out. And I think it also has made the game a little bit more challenging, right? Because we all have access to the information. Back in the day, people might come to the draft with a magazine and they're not up to date. No one does that anymore. If they do have the magazine, they're not using it as a reference to draft. So there's just so much information out there. There's a lot of talent as well. There's a lot of people who know what they're talking about. I will say this though. I do think there's a difference between being a good analyst and a good player. And I think there's a lot of analysts in the space who are not good players. And it's not being disrespectful. Like I hear a lot of people, great information, they can break down players, but then I see them play in a league and they're not good because the roster build is completely different than just analyzing players. And there's, again, a lot of people are great at analyzing players, breaking down offenses, situation, but the draft is a puzzle. And you need to be able to put the pieces together. You can't just take the best talent. There's a way to build a roster. And I think a lot of people don't have that skill. And again, I play in a lot of industry leagues with people and I see it. I'm like, damn, they know what they're talking about, but they're not putting together a good team. The roster build. And maybe some people are good at drafting and not good on the waiver wire and vice versa. So there's a lot of components that go in to being a successful fantasy player. And I've heard this argument too. A lot of the high stakes players, I feel like they come at the analyst, which I think is unfair at times because you could be a good high stakes player too, but you suck as an analyst because maybe you're boring or you don't know how to deliver information to people that are listening. You also have to be entertaining as well. Like there's a combination. So there's a lot of different skill sets that go into it. But yeah, there's a lot of people that want to do this now. The other aspect of the industry that I think is hurt, there's so many people that are doing this for very little money or free. And that hurts because people are like, okay, well, we can just give out freelance assignments, pay this guy this amount, or this guy is willing to do it for free for a little bit. And that hurts. Now, obviously, if you have a big brand and a big following on social media, that's going to help because you're going to bring eyeballs to the table. But there are just so many people that are willing to do this for a low price, man. And I think that hurts the top of the industry because they realize, hey, we don't need to pay people. We can get this person's excited to do it. Yeah, they don't have the following, but you know what? We'll get by with it. So the industry has changed so much too. I mean, now with sports betting involved too, that's changed things a bit too. But also I think some of the money is out too, especially remember we had DraftKings and FanDuel with DFS. They were throwing around a lot of money. That money's not around as much anymore.
All right, well, if you can make some money here, let's talk about it. Maybe it's another talent. Do you have a hidden talent that maybe people don't realize there, Adam? What's one of those skill sets that you have that may be underrated?
Acting. So one of my favorite shows is Impractical Jokers. And I always said, are you familiar with the show?
I am. Yes, I am.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that show. And I watch it and I'm like, this is what I want to do. If I wasn't doing fantasy, I want to be on the show because I'm really good at pulling off pranks. And I would be able to do a lot of that with a straight face. Now, my favorite is Joe. He left the show, unfortunately. He was my favorite because he would improvise very well. He wouldn't laugh. I've had this argument with Howard Bender and Justin Fensterman. They love Sal. I like all of the guys, but Sal to me laughs too much and he backs down from challenges. I can't identify with that. Like, again, I don't want to lose. I will do almost anything. Like I watch, and I know people are like, oh, it's easier said than done when you're behind a camera. No, I don't want to lose. Like some of the things I see them refuse to do, I'm like, really? You refuse to do that? No, I will say, I guess it is different when you're in the scenario and you're sweating and the cameras are rolling, but I hate losing and I'll pretty much do almost anything, no matter how uncomfortable it is, to get a win. So I did take an acting class in college and I loved it. And I always thought to myself, man, what if I just went into acting. Like I always felt like that's something I could do. Comedian, the one thing with me with comedian, I don't really write material. I feel like I'm just natural and feed off others. Like if you've listened to any of my podcasts or shows, like I feed off what the other person says and turn that into a joke. I'm not really someone who writes material, but comedian, man, I respect them. And I always analyze a comedian by when someone in the crowd says something, how do they respond? Because that's off script. That's improvisation. So like Curb Your Enthusiasm, that's one of my favorite shows ever. And there's a lot of improv on that. So I love comedy, man. I love to laugh. I love to joke around. I love to mess around with people and pull pranks, man. And I'm really good at it because I can be serious and I don't laugh. That's the problem people have. They laugh. You know, they start doing something and they start laughing and you can tell, all right, they're just playing around. So yeah, and practical jokers, man. If they had like a tryout for that fourth member, now that Joe's gone, man, I want in.
Hook a guy up here. Hook someone up here. Adam wants in with the impractical jokers. And you know what? It could work. I can't do it. I got, like I said, no fear, no problem doing stuff. I have no problem making myself look like an idiot. But then I get this little smirk on my face every once in a while, like a little tear up. I've always joked where you either get a smile out of me, but if I smile, you don't get the eyes. If I keep the eyes open, you're not going to get a smile because my face doesn't work quite that well. It's like it doesn't work for me, right? So what does going to work is a blind rankings portion of the show. Now I got 5 rap artists that I want to throw out at you, but here's the catch: you have to rank them before you hear them all. So the first name I throw out there, you rank them. That ranking spot is now gone. You can't go back. You can't swap. So you gotta be careful how you rank. There's strategy involved. Not really, because you have no idea what's coming. But we're going to start this off with the dog father himself, Snoop Dogg. Where do you got him ranked?
Ooh, I am a big fan of Snoop, but I feel like there's so many other rappers out there that I prefer. Man, I don't know where you're going with this because you said your rap knowledge is not deep. So you're probably going to go mainstream. So I'm going to go 4. You rank from 1 to 5. That's what you want me to do, right?
Yeah. No, I got you.
I'm gonna go 4.
4. That's low. That feels low to me.
I was gonna go. I like him, but again, he's not like top for me.
All right. What if I pull a pant leg up and I go with the old LL Cool J look? We're not talking like Any Given Sunday LL Cool J. We're talking about the artist here.
All right, I'll go 3 with LL Cool J. Definitely like him. He's from Queens, like myself.
Okay.
So I'll go 3 with LL Cool J.
3 for LL Cool J. Snoop Dogg at 4. And now from the wedding singer, the hip hop granny. Where do you got her at? Hippity, hoppity, hippity, hoppity.
Man, I don't know who else you're going to come with. I guess I'm going to go 5.
Okay. Well, hey, that's worked out pretty good here so far. But now I got to throw out you Tupac. Where do you got him? 1 or 2?
I'm going to go 2. Actually, I'm not as big as Tupac fan as others. I liked him actually better when he was on the East Coast before he went out West. But I'll go 2. Oh, man. I'm afraid now who you have left me with at 1.
Well, you've got this going here pretty good so far. Tupac at 2. You got LL Cool J at 3. Snoop Dogg at 4. The hip-hop granny there from the wedding singer. She comes at number 5. And now we go Vanilla Ice. No, I'm just joking. I'm not going to put Vanilla on here. It was actually Papoose here, so you got him at number 1.
Really?
So it worked out really well for you. Yeah.
Oh, it did work out well because I would put him 1. I know people might think I'm crazy, but again, first time I heard him, I was like, "Wow, who's this guy?" And it just his lyricism, his storytelling, and I was fortunate enough to interview him twice on Sirius XM. It's funny because I DM'd him on Twitter. I forgot what year, and never got a response. Then one day I'm sitting there on my phone and I see a DM from Papoose. I'm like, what the hell? He's like, it was like 3 years later, 4 years later. He's like, oh yeah, sorry, I'm just seeing this and that. And I was like, wow. And I said, yeah, I got a show. Would you mind coming on? He's like, I'll reach out to my PR person. He did. And, I just, the first time he came on was with me and Howard Bender. So Howard, not big into hip hop either, but he went and listened to like his latest project. He's like, I actually like it. It's good. I'm like, for real? He's like, yeah. So he came on and we interviewed him and everything. And it was a great moment. And then I had him on again on the Lisa Ann Does Fantasy show. And then Howard had asked him, we wanted to use one of his songs for our podcast, our Annie Up. And we never wound up getting into the numbers, but and then obviously was no longer working with Fantasy Alarm to do that podcast anymore. But yeah, so that was one of the benefits, is to interview him a couple of times.
No, that'd be one of those highlights, like a bucket list kind of check off there for you so much. Like, I know that when I hit those certain guests and stuff, and you're like, you throw those DMs out there, you slide into those DMs. Let's see, if you're not going to block me from coming to your DMs, I'm going to probably slide in there and see what happens. But to get a response 3 years later, that's like Christmas. That's bonus money right there. Now, you could probably write a pretty good book about everything that's kind of gone on in your life from start to finish. I mean, the story's not over yet, but if you were to write a book about your career, what would that title of that book be?
I've joked around with this before. I forgot what we come up with, but that's a good question. If I have to give a quick answer, I would say The Black Book. And for anyone who knows me, they would get that. I'll just leave it at that.
Leave it at The Black Book.
Anyone who knows me would laugh at that. Just put it that way.
All right, well, we'll cut this clip out here. We'll stick that on the promotions there and see what kind of clips out there. Because there's like a cult following for Adam Ronis out there, I'm sure, in the social media
world. You know what was crazy? Like, that morning show on Sirius XM Fantasy, you didn't realize like how many people listened to that show. Like, that was like prime time. There, so many people would tell me, "Oh, someone I work with knows who you are." They're like, they can't believe I know you, and they were like, "Yeah, I know Adam. He's just a regular person." They're like, "Oh, I can't believe," like. It was insane. I mean, I was able to get like free dinners out of it and perks. It was insane. I met 2 women who listened to the show in other states, and I went to other states to meet them. So it was wild, man. Like, we really had a big following, and it was really sad when that had to come to an end, because it was mostly me and Scott Engel, and then Corey Parson joined us, and he added another element to it. He was the producer, but he came on air a lot. I mean, I can't tell you how much fun it was, because I'm not a morning person at all. I hate getting up early. So if I get up early, it's for something I love. The only time outside of work that I get up early now is to play softball on Sunday mornings. Usually get up 7:30 a.m. We play early in the morning, 8:30, 9 a.m., because I love playing. But because I remember Scott first said the show's going to be 7 or 8 a.m. I said, yeah, 8 a.m. I'm not doing 7. He comes back and he's like, he decided on 7. You're either in or out. I said, all right, I'm in. But it was rough because, like I said, I didn't sleep that much. There were times I stayed up the entire night because I'd be in bed. I couldn't fall asleep, kept looking at my clock, and I'm like, all right, it's 3:15. No point in sleeping an hour. Let me just get to the city early, get some breakfast. But once that mic went on, it was just so much fun. Now, when the mic went off and the show ended, I absolutely crashed, would fall asleep on the subway. But when you want to do something and you enjoy it, you find a way to do it. And that show was so much fun. Anytime I go on the microphone, anytime I do a radio show, a podcast, I write, it's so much fun. And that's why I've been able to do this for so long. It's always been fun. It's never been a job. Now, there are certain days you're like, yeah, like it doesn't matter what line of work you're in, no matter how much you love it. There are going to be days like that. I'm sure it happens for professional athletes, right? They all have stuff going on in their personal life that we don't know about. And sometimes we find out later. We're all like, man, I love this guy. Why didn't he have a good year? Oh, he was going through a divorce. His child was sick. And that's the one thing trying to analyze these players that we just don't know. And it's the same thing with guys coming out of college, right? You don't know how someone is going to act once they get the money. And we have a long line of players that once they got that money, they stopped. They didn't care. And we don't know that. Well, I mean, there could be hints of it, but you don't know how someone is going to be once they get that $25 million guaranteed. So there's so much that goes into it. But yeah, the bottom line was I loved doing that show. It was so much fun because we would always make fun of each other. So it was like friends doing a show. Yes, we gave a lot of fantasy information. And the other thing too, one thing that I feel that lacks in a lot of shows, there's no debate. I think there's too much agreement. I don't think that helps the listener. Now, I'm not saying you need to have a debate just to have a debate, but me and Scott went at it. Like, we had some big debates, And I think one of the reasons why people don't do it, I think they take things too personally. I can get very loud, but I'm not going to insult you. You can't do the name calling, but I can get very loud because even when I was with Dr. Roto, he's like, "Are you done yelling at me?" And I'm like, "It's not yelling. I have to say this to some females too. I'm passionate, so I get loud. I don't look at it as yelling, and maybe I need to examine myself because it comes off as yelling to someone else, and I have to respect that. But I'm just loud and passionate, and I think some people can't get into debate because they take it personal if someone is insulting your analysis of it, and you can't look at it that way. So we had a lot of debates, and it got animated at times, but we had so much fun. We'd make fun of each other, and it was entertainment. It was a morning show, and we got a lot of positive feedback over the years from so many people, and that's definitely one of the most memorable periods for sure. Because again, like I told you, I am not a morning person at all. I hate the morning, but I had so much fun doing that show because I was passionate about it. I loved doing it, and I always wanted to do radio. It was always something I wanted to do. So to get that opportunity in 2010, I'll always be grateful for it. And I have to thank Scott Engel for that because he's the one who put me on and gave me the opportunity. And I don't know where I would be without that opportunity. And some people never get it, right? There's some people who are probably sitting here listening like, well, I never got that opportunity. And yeah, a lot of it is, but I put in the hard work and put myself in a position to get there. But sometimes you don't get it. But if you do, you got to take advantage of it and bang that door down and run away with it. And I'm grateful that I had that opportunity because it's put me in a position where I am today. And if I didn't get it, I don't know if I would be.
I love you mentioned the passion that comes out because I feel the same way. I get the same way. I get loud. I get excited. And I have, like, usually when me and Terry and Major are doing a show, I got one of them to kind of pull me back just a little bit because you always need somebody to kind of, hey, Adam, let's come bring it down just a little bit there. And you mentioned you don't know if these players are going through. And I always enjoy watching the Stanley Cup playoffs, and then you hear the list of injuries. Trouba for the New York Rangers basically has no ankle. He's been playing with a broken ankle since like middle of the season, like a chunk of it missing. I mean, these are things that we don't know about when we put into those analysts and we get them down, break down the film, and we're like, okay, something's not working, whatever it happens to be. But if you weren't doing all this, if you weren't in the fantasy world, would you be a professional softball player? You kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I heard you're like a Hall of Fame caliber softball player, like the Ichiro of softball. You've got a plaque, a Hall of Fame plaque there, basically.
I'm very good, but I wouldn't say I'm that great. I'm just happy to still be playing at this age. And a lot of guys on my team are even older than me.
Tell me about it.
So I respect that. I've been fortunate, don't really have any major injuries. I did crash into a pole trying to catch a ball. Fortunately, my hat took the brunt of it and my chest too, but I couldn't breathe for a minute. But yeah, I used to play in Long Island. And when I moved out to New Jersey, my softball team retired my number and gave me a plaque. So I actually do have that on my wall. So that was pretty cool. And then I came out here, played with the team for 2 years. And then my current team, I've played with them for like 5-6 years. Yeah, I just love playing. It's good. It also, as you get older too, that exercise is important, running around and everything. So yeah, I wish I could play even more. I mean, there was a period probably, I think in my late 20s and 30s where I would play 6 games on Sunday. I would play like 2 at 9 a.m., 2 at 2, and then 2 at night. Play 2 on Saturday, and then during the week, whenever someone needed someone, like, hey, we need an extra, will you play? If I was available, I would. So there were times probably back then I was playing 10 to 14 games a week, and I wish I could do that now. I don't know what my max is now. I only do 2 on Sundays. I'm available to fill in during the week if needed, but yeah, I'm hoping I could play to 60, 65. As I'm getting older, I'm more conscious of being healthy is important as well. The food that in this country is so terrible, and a lot of people are not aware of it. And I'm not saying like I eat the best stuff, like we all have guilty pleasures, but a lot of the stuff is no good. That's why our country has so many health issues. It's the food industry, and the medical industry wants us sick because they make money. It's a business, and it's sad when you do more research. So I'm just doing what I can to stay as active as possible. And that's the other thing too. This is funny. So I was always on the go, right? Because I told you I was taking the subway, walking to New York City, covering height. So I was always walking and active. And then about 2015, 2016, I was working from home exclusively. Okay. So I wasn't thinking about, I'm just sitting around. And then one of my girlfriends one day was like, let me see your phone. I was like, oh no, she's going to see all my other women DMing me and shit. No, I'm just kidding. But she's like, let me see your phone. And she's like, oh my God, you're like dead. You're doing like 2,000 steps a day. And I didn't even think about it. I was like, oh shoot. So ever since she told me that, I take walks every day, try to do 10,000 steps a day because they say walking is one of the best things for you. For those in the business, you got to take care of your health, man. Because football season comes, I get it. Like right, Sunday we're watching football all day. We're sitting down. We're watching Monday night. We're grinding the waiver wire on Tuesday, getting ready for the week. You can get lost and you could be inactive. So you got to make it a point if you are in this business, working from home, working remote, like a lot of people are. Got to be active and walk. And that's one thing that I've done. And the goal is 10,000 steps a day.
So that sounds like something that the fantasy football industry has kind of taught you right now, is to take care of yourself. But what has fantasy football basically taught you about yourself, other than, hey, maybe every once in a while get off your ass and do some walking?
Nah, just how competitive I am, man. I hate to lose, man. You know, it really eats at me. I've been trying to get better about it and kind of let things go, because sometimes I sweat it too much. Like I feel like I focus more on the losses than the wins. Like I feel like I don't enjoy the wins enough. And like this past year, had a really good year in the FFWC, their online championship. I finished 10th overall. They had 3 beat Adam Ronis leagues. I won 2 of them. One of them I had a 14. No, what do we do now? 14 weeks of the regular season, right? Yeah. So I was 13-1 with the most points. But yeah, my home league, I couldn't win. So like, I'm like, why can't I win my home league? That should be easier, right? Instead of a high stakes league. So even in the NFFC, I did their silver bullet. That's $1,000 one entry. You only get one entry, because a lot of people have all these multiple entries. And that one, I finished second in the league to double my entry fee. So I had a pretty good year, but like I look at the losses a little bit too much. And sometimes I don't enjoy the victories enough. That's because I hate losing. So I think that's something I'm trying to learn to get better at. Obviously, you want to learn from your losses. But I think fantasy football teaches you like discipline. There's so many, you need to have a regimented schedule. Like I'll never miss waivers. It just won't happen. I'll have everything written down, what time waivers runs, when things get done. So I think it teaches you discipline, strategy. I think there's a lot of things that you can learn from it. A lot of people look at, oh, it's just a game, but there's so many elements of life that you can incorporate that can help you become better in your life from playing fantasy football. And you make so many friendships too. I mean, we do a lot of online drafts, unfortunately, now. We don't do as much in person. I probably do. What do I do? I probably do like maybe 3. So we do the Flex League. That's an industry league that I've done that Jake Seeley runs. So they always have a draft in New York every year. So I don't know if you could see that belt in the background, the half belt. That's from 2 years ago because of the whole Bengals-Bills fiasco where they canceled the game. Me and Joe Pisapia wound up splitting the championship. But this past year, I won it by myself. So I will have a full belt when we meet in August to add to the half belt. So that draft is done in person. Then we do a draft in New York. It's called the Greenwich Street Tavern League. Chris Vaccaro, who's a big-time high-stakes player, he owns the Greenwich Street Tavern in the Village. And we get 2 groups of 12 drafting there. So we have 2 individual leagues and an overall championship. So there's some industry people in that, some fans, some high stakes players. So that is always fun. I haven't been to the high stakes drafts in person. If in Vegas, they're phenomenal, man. Like they're phenomenal. But yeah, doing these drafts in person are great, man. And you make so many friends in this industry too. That's the one good thing. Being in it so long, you know so many people. As you mentioned the Fantasy Football Expo before, going to Canton. I didn't go until 2 years ago. That was my first time going. And then I went again last year and was fortunate to play flag football against Dez Bryant. The first game that he played was against my team. Of course, we lost. He was the quarterback. But yeah, the friendships too that you get. And there's so many good people in this industry. That's the crazy part. you would think with all of us kind of being competitors and fighting for people to join our sites and consume our content, there would be a lot of rivalries, but it really isn't. Most people are just really cool, and the camaraderie that we see when we're out at these events, whether it's the Expo or FSGA, it truly is amazing.
It's funny that you say that, because I just had a birthday there, and it was on Facebook, and I got a bunch of fancy analysts that are on my Facebook as friends, and obviously I got my regular people that have been around me forever. And there's guys like on my timeline, they're like, you know him, you know him, you know him. I'm like, yeah, that seems like it's pretty normal to me. But it is, like you said, they're people from the Expo, people that you interact with all the time in this community. It is so welcoming and warming. And if you're even thinking about getting involved, I say just do it. Like, get involved right now. And you've got nothing to lose, because it will welcome you with open arms, as long as you're not a jackass one way or the other. And even then, there's a place for you somewhere in the industry as well.
Yeah,
it's like a little niche.
It might be at a smaller table. It might be at a smaller table, but there'll be a place for you. I mean, so one of the things that amazed me, so I was on vacation in Bermuda, right? And I was with my girlfriend at the time. We were in a store, and someone comes up to me. It was a cruise, and we docked in Bermuda. It's like, "Are you Adam Ronis?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, I listen to your show every morning." And then his wife's like, "You made my husband a lot of money," and asked to take a picture with me. I was just like, this is crazy, man. And he's like, "Yeah, I thought it was you the other night, but I wasn't sure. And then I saw you had on a Mets jersey, and I figured it was you." So it's just crazy, man. And that was from like the Sirius XM show. The reach that we had and the impact that we had is just, you kind of look back on it. In the moment, you kind of don't. Sometimes, I don't know if you don't realize it, but when you look back and reflect on it, you're like, wow, man, that was just so many people were listening. And I even made friends from the show. Like, they were callers, and we're friends to this day. At least a few people that, again, I didn't know who they were before that show. They would call in regularly, and somehow or another we started talking and are friends to this day.
Now, you've thrown out a lot of advice throughout today's show there, but give us one last piece of advice for those who are trying to kick that door in right now so they can open up a door for themselves.
Whatever it is you want to do, you just got to start it, because people want to see some work. So if you want to write, just start writing, even if it's just for yourself and no one else sees it, or reach out to a bunch of sites and say, "Hey, can I contribute for free to start?" I mean, obviously they're going to want to see some work, but just do it yourself. Put it in a book each day. You want to do a podcast, just do it on your own. Get a microphone and just you don't even have to put it out there anywhere. Just start talking into a mic, record it. You can do it on your phone, and then maybe send it to someone that's in the industry and say, "Hey, I'm sorry to bother you, but I really want to get into this. What's your critique?" But whatever it is, you got to do it. You need to get something out there. You need to start gaining some experience. And we've seen so many people who didn't have much experience, weren't well known, and now are freelancing or doing work for a bunch of different sites. So you just got to start somewhere. And, I know Tara is a good example of that, right? I mean, I did a show with her on Fantasy Alarm. We did like a Thursday night preview before the Thursday night game, a live stream. We were taking questions from subs and everything. And now I see her all over doing work for so many different sites. So, and she started here. So you just got to start somewhere. I guess going, if there's a local event like FSGA or the Fantasy Football Expo in Canton is perfect, right? Because you got hundreds of people there. You'll run into people, and networking is a big thing. I feel like I probably didn't do it well enough. I think networking is very important. You never know who can help you down the line. And if you just establish a relationship with some people and stay in touch with them, they can open a door for you. And that's really what you need. But if you want to do it and you're passionate about it, just start doing it, whatever it is, and now it's different for me because you have so many avenues to come up, right? There's video, there's audio, there's written. So there's so many ways to do it.
All right, Adam, one last thing here. Let the people know where they can find you right now. I know you got a few different things going on.
Yeah, on Twitter at Adam Ronis, on Instagram at ARON88, on TikTok at Adam Ronis, and I give out bets on my Dub Club. You can find the link on my Twitter. Give out bets for NBA, MLB, and NFL, so pretty much every day the rest of the year.
Well, he's Adam Ronis. I'm Matt Donnelly. And if you thought I was going to stop like Papoose, you're right. We'll see you next time on Behind the Grind. Take care.